Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take that pile of research, those articles, all that source material, and really pull out the key insights for you.
And today, we're tackling Chuck Klosterman. He's someone who hasn't just written about low culture. He's used it really as the raw material for some pretty high-level thinking.
Yeah, the sources paint this picture of him as, well, maybe the essential guide if you're trying to make sense of American pop culture today. Media theory, too, and even how we think about history.
He really does have this unique knack, doesn't he? Taking subjects that, let's be honest, a lot of academics might just dismiss and giving them this serious, almost literary treatment.
Uh-huh. Like analyzing glam metal with the same intensity you'd expect for, I don't know, Faulkner or something.
Exactly. Or a fictional sports show. He gives it the same weight as, like, a deep ethical argument.
And the scope is just huge looking at the sources. I mean, 12 books, including 2 novels. He was a columnist for Esquire for ESPN.com.
Right. And maybe most famously, writing The Ethicist for the New York Times Magazine. He's kind of popped up everywhere.
Covering things we maybe didn't even know needed covering until he sort of pointed it out.
And it's worth remembering, this credibility, it started pretty early. The sources point out he snagged that ASCAP Deems Taylor Award back in 2002 for music criticism.
Oh, right. 2002.
Yeah, so that's not just trivia. It tells you the established critical world already saw him as a major voice in music even before his big pop culture books really hit the mainstream.
Okay, so that sets up our mission for this deep dive for you listening. We want to figure out, how does someone who gets known for dissecting, 80s hair bands, often hilariously, but seriously too, how does that guy evolve? How does he become a consulting editor for a site like Grantland, which was pretty intellectual, and then the person tackling ethics for the Times? That journey is what we need to unpack.
Absolutely. So we'll start with his background, that journey from rural North Dakota to the, media center of New York, because that starting point is really crucial to his whole perspective.
Okay.
And then, we'll spend most of our time really digging into the themes across all his books, his essays, looking at how he pulls off that blend of, let's say, serious thinking and sometimes seemingly trivial topics.
All right, let's get into that origin story then.
Yeah.
Because the geography, it feels really important here. Charles John Klosterman, born June 5, 1972, in Breckenridge, Minnesota. But raised somewhere else, right?
That's right, yeah. Raised just across the border. His roots are pure American Midwest. Youngest of 7 kids, Florence and William Klosterman. Grew up Roman Catholic on a farm. Windermere, North Dakota.
Windermere, okay.
Yeah, the sources really stress that German and Polish descent. Very grounded rural background.
Windermere, North Dakota. It really does feel like the key to his whole outlook, doesn't it? That kind of outsider-looking-in thing. He finished high school there, Windermere High, in 90. Then went on to the University of North Dakota, graduated in 94, BA in journalism, minor in English Lit. So you see the toolkit forming right there, the discipline of reporting, but also that literary analysis framework.
Yeah. And this is where it starts getting really interesting for you, the listener, to think about, that contrast. I mean, the sheer difference between where he came from, this very rural, farm-based life in North Dakota, and what he ended up writing about. Super specific, often coastal pop culture phenomena. LA glam rock, New York media stuff, celebrity culture.
It's such a gap. And it feels intentional, like that distance is part of his method.
Yeah.
He wasn't in the culture he writes about originally. He had to, import it, right? Through magazines, MTV, records.
Importing it and then filtering it through that specific Midwestern lens.
So what does that vantage point actually give him, analytically speaking?
Well, I think it provides this unique, almost anthropological view of American media culture, something someone, say, growing up in LA or New York just wouldn't have. He doesn't approach pop culture like it's inherently cool or something to aspire to.
Right. It's more like an artifact to be examined.
Precisely. Something to be observed, analyzed, and maybe found kind of weird or baffling sometimes. It gives him this layer of skepticism, I think.
Skepticism. How so?
Well, he can ask these really basic questions that people inside the bubble might just take for granted, like, why do we all suddenly care about this particular celebrity? Or why did that band become historically important?
When you're getting those signals from far away, maybe they don't seem so obviously important.
Exactly. They don't have an immediate impact on your daily life on a farm in Windermere. So you're almost forced to think about their function, their construction, not just, bask in their supposed coolness.
Okay, so that skepticism, that ability to be both into it and step back from it.
That's the core of it. Think about it. How did a kid on a farm process something like Mötley Crüe, all that LA decadence? He had to analyze it, apply some kind of critical framework to something that was maybe designed not to be analyzed like that.
Right.
And that balancing act, that's his whole approach right there, taking
Gotcha.
seemingly ridiculous seriously.
So the journalism training from UND gives him the tools. North Dakota gives him the perspective. He's basically set up perfectly to tackle the culture machine.
Yeah, and that combination, that outsider view plus the actual journalism chops, let him start climbing pretty fast after college. Started right there in Fargo, North Dakota as a journalist.
But the first move wasn't straight to the coast, was it? He went to Ohio first.
That's right, yeah. The Akron Beacon Journal, reporter and arts critic. And that's a really important step, I think. Working at a mid-sized city paper like that, you have to cover everything, learn fast, write on deadline. It's like the perfect training ground.
Honing the skills before hitting the big time.
Which happened in 2002. That's the pivot point. Moves to New York City.
Okay, NYC.
And almost immediately lands at Spin Magazine. Senior writer and columnist 2002 to 2006. And remember, that 2002 ASCAP award lines up perfectly with this, so he arrives in New York already validated as a top music writer.
And then the floodgates open, magazine-wise. The list and the sources is just, well, it's impressive. GQ, Esquire.
New York Times Magazine, The Believer, The Guardian, The Washington Post, I mean.
He's everywhere. It shows incredible adaptability, right?
Yeah.
Writing for all these different audiences, different styles.
Totally. And it wasn't just one-offs. His stuff kept getting picked for those best of anthologies. Best music writing, best American travel writing, even best American non-required reading.
Non-required reading, I like that.
Yeah, it speaks volumes, right? It shows consistency and that his voice worked across all these different fields, quality and versatility.
But he didn't just stick to music, which is maybe the most interesting part of this phase. He branched out.
Big time! The move into sports was significant. Started writing for ESPN's Page 2, late 2005.
Why sports? What was the connection?
Well, think about it. Sports fandom, like rock fandom, involves intense loyalty, mythology, memory, often completely irrational devotion, right?
Oh, that's silly.
So his analytical tools, asking why we care so much about stuff that's ultimately kind of arbitrary, it just mapped perfectly onto sports, analyzing fandom itself.
Okay, that makes sense. But then came the really big shift, the one that maybe reached the broadest audience, the ethicist.
Yeah, taking over the ethicist column for the New York Times Magazine, that was huge.
It feels like such a different gear. From analyzing, Guns N' Roses lyrics to advising people on real-life moral quandaries.
It's a massive leap on the surface. You're moving from analyzing cultural products to analyzing human behavior and justification. How we decide what's right and wrong, and how we, crucially, explain those decisions to ourselves and others.
Was there a risk, though? I mean, his style is often ironic, very self-aware. Could that have felt, flippant when dealing with serious ethical problems?
That's a great question. And I think that's where his skill really shows. He didn't ditch his voice. He adapted it. He used that clarity, that knack for spotting contradictions, that sort of grounded Midwestern common sense.
Not to make fun of the problems.
Exactly. But to dissect the often kind of wonky assumptions behind the questions people were asking, he treated the ethical dilemmas themselves almost like cultural artifacts. Like the way someone framed their moral problem often said more about our societal norms, our hidden biases, than whatever the right answer was. He was illuminating the weird logic we use to justify ourselves. It was less about giving simple answers and more about exposing the complexities, the human flaws baked into the questions.
Okay, got it. So the early career builds the voice and the rigor. New York proves it's adaptable. Now let's really get into the books where he cements this whole worldview.
Right, the books are where you really see him elevate this whole project, taking everyday stuff and making it feel, well, profound. His early books really laid the groundwork for serious pop culture criticism as we know it now.
Starting with Fargo Rock City in 2001, a heavy metal odyssey in rural North Dakota. That title alone, with the umlauts.
Yeah, the umlauts are key. It's pure Klosterman. And that book, it's the perfect embodiment of his core idea, isn't it? It's funny. It's a memoir. It's a history of glam metal.
But it's more than that. It's like an anthropological study, you said.
Exactly. It's about what happens when this super theatrical, very specific LA culture hair metal from the Sunset Strip gets beamed out to a totally different, isolated place like rural North Dakota. He analyzes the gap between the fantasy, the LA myth, and the reality of listening to Mötley Crüe while driving a tractor or whatever.
Right, so that establishes the brand. Deep thoughts wrapped in a funny, self-aware package, taking Rat as seriously as, I don't know, the Romantics.
Pretty much. And then jump forward to 2005, Killing Yourself to Live, 85% of a true story, the road trip book about rock, death, love.
Okay, we have to talk about that subtitle. 85% of a true story. What is going on there?
It's brilliant, right? By putting that number on it, 85%, he's doing a couple of really important things. First, he's telling you up front, look, memory is faulty, narrative gets shaped, this isn't pure fact.
So managing expectations, but also
making a point. He's signaling his awareness of subjective reality, giving himself permission, maybe, to tweak things slightly to get at a bigger emotional truth, while simultaneously making you, the reader, constantly aware that you're reading a constructed narrative.
the theme perception versus objective fact that comes back again and again, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It becomes central to almost everything he writes after that. Which leads us right into his big mainstream breakthrough books, the pop culture manifestos.
Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs in 2003. That one was huge, a bestseller. How did it define a genre?
Well, it wasn't just like random essays. It felt like a coherent argument. The argument being real insights about our culture are often hiding in plain sight in the stuff we usually ignore or call low culture.
Right, the Low Culture Manifesto subtitle.
Yeah, he basically perfected the art of applying serious critical theory to Cocoa Puffs or Saved by the Bell or The Sims.
I remember the Saved by the Bell essay. He argues the characters are these perfect archetypes of consumerism.
Yeah, like they're so perfectly manufactured, they almost teach a generation how to navigate high school social structures and, fake problems. Or analyzing The Sims to talk about modern romance and control.
He finds the profound in the mundane.
That's the hook. If you look hard enough, the big ideas are right there in the trivia stuff.
Yeah.
And he followed that up with Eating the Dinosaur in 2009. That one felt even more focused on how media and technology were changing how we perceive everything. Celebrity, time, reality itself.
He was definitely ahead of the curve on some of that stuff, thinking about mediated life before it became, our constant reality.
For sure. And then comes the really interesting shift, where he starts using pop culture not just as the subject, but more as the evidence for tackling these big, abstract philosophical questions.
Like the philosophical turn, where does that start?
You can really see it crystallizing with I Wear the Black Hat. Grappling with villains, real and imagined, in 2013. That book isn't just about who's bad, it's about why we decide someone is a villain.
It's about perception again.
Exactly. Why do we collectively condemn, say, the Unabomber, but maybe turn another destructive figure into an anti-hero, or just forget them? It's not about a fixed moral score, it's about how villainy functions within our cultural stories.
So the villain is defined by how they fit into the narrative we tell ourselves about ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. Who plays the role of antagonist in our current story? But the absolute peak of this philosophical approach, I think, and his most successful book in this vein was But What If We're Wrong? Thinking about the present as if it were the past from 2016.
Ah, yes. This one feels like a real mind-bender. It forces you, the listener, to really question your own time.
Totally. It asks you to imagine looking back and now from the future, the way we look back at, say, the 1800s. What bedrock beliefs, what cultural certainties of today will seem completely wrong, maybe even laughable in 100 years.
It's an exercise in intellectual humility, basically, confronting the idea that we're probably wrong about a lot of things we feel certain about.
Right. He uses examples like, maybe our understanding of gravity is just, a temporary model that future science will completely overturn, like how we view pre-Newtonian ideas now.
Or rock and roll. He questions if it will really be seen as this dominant, permanent art form we think it is.
Yeah. He floats the idea that maybe future critics will see it as this weird, historically specific blip, like vaudeville or something, while maybe some writer, hardly anyone knows now, will be seen as the truly enduring figure of our era.
So challenging the whole idea of predicting what lasts. Our certainty might actually be a sign that it won't last.
It's a powerful idea. It forces you to question everything. Is democracy as we know it the final form? Is our understanding of basic biology correct? By making us imagine future historians finding our current beliefs quaint or absurd, he makes us sharper critics of the present.
And clearly that approach resonated. His next major nonfiction book, The 90s from 2022, about that decade.
Debuted at #2 on the Times bestseller list. Yeah, that kind of sustained success shows he's really tapped into something.
We should also mention the collections, right? Chuck Klosterman V and Chuck Klosterman X. They seem important too.
Definitely. 4V from 2006 had articles, but also that semi-autobiographical novella hinting at his fiction writing. And X from 2017 had that amazing subtitle, A Highly Specific, Defiantly Incomplete History of the Early 21st Century.
Classic Klosterman. Acknowledging the limits right up front.
Exactly. It shows he sees his work not just as commentary, but as a kind of active, subjective archiving of our time through his very specific filter.
Okay, so beyond the essays and the big idea books, he's also experimented quite a bit, hasn't he? Fiction, other formats.
Yeah, he hasn't just stuck to one thing. His fiction work is really interesting because you can see him using stories, hypothetical situations to explore those same core themes about perception, reality, isolation.
Like Downtown Owl, his first novel in 2008. That one goes right back to his roots, right? Fictional town, Owl, North Dakota.
Exactly. After years analyzing culture coming out of the coast, he flips it and gives voice to that quiet, Midwestern place that shaped his own skepticism. It feels like putting North Dakota back in the center of the story for a change.
Then The Visible Man in 2011. That one's more sci-fi. Guy with a cloaking device.
Yeah, but it's classic Klosterman sci-fi. The device isn't really the point. It's a tool to explore our anxieties about being watched, about voyeurism, about the kind of detached observation that celebrity culture thrives on. The cloak is basically just a physical version of the critical distance he tries to achieve in his essays.
Okay, that makes sense. But the really intriguing one, maybe, is Raised in Captivity from 2019. That collection of short stories described as fictional nonfiction. What does that even mean?
Yeah, fictional nonfiction. It's such a Klosterman term, isn't it? It really calls back to that 85% true idea.
Okay, how so?
Well, it basically makes that concept official. It acknowledges up front that absolute objective truth is slippery, especially when you're dealing with weird anecdotes, personal memories, or things filtered through media. By calling it fictional nonfiction, he gives himself the freedom to explore ideas through made-up scenarios.
While still asking you to think about the underlying point as if it were real analysis.
Exactly. It's like saying the story might be invented, but the observation about human nature or society embedded within it, that part's real. Think about that. It's a statement about the limits of pure journalism in a way.
Interesting. And then he even did those card sets, hypotheticals and supertheticals.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. It basically takes his main tool, the weird hypothetical question designed to spark debate and reveal assumptions unless the audience use it themselves, turns his method into a party game almost.
So he's spreading the method. And he did actual academic work, too, taught in Germany.
Yeah, Leipzig University, 2008, Picador guest professor for literature. So he wasn't just commenting on American culture, he was teaching international students how to analyze it critically.
Plus, his role at Grantland. That feels significant. Original consulting editor?
Absolutely vital. Grantland was trying to do something specific, blend serious, long-form writing with sports and pop culture. Klosterman's involvement gave it instant intellectual credibility. He was the perfect bridge figure for what they were trying to achieve, connecting that old-school journalism depth with a new, smarter take on culture.
And then there are all the media appearances. He seems to pop up in documentaries, TV shows.
Yeah, he's become a recognizable cultural figure in his own right. Like in that LCD Sound System documentary, Shut Up and Play the Hits.
Right, his interview with James Murphy was kind of the core of that film, wasn't it?
It really was. It provided the intellectual spine, the why behind the band's decision to stop. He wasn't just a talking head, he was framing the whole narrative.
And then the more, well, funny appearances, like being animated on Adult Swim.
Huh. Yeah, on Carl's Stone Cold Lock of the Century of the Week. Which is great because it shows he doesn't take his own persona too seriously. The humor comes from plopping his very analytical style into that completely absurd context.
And didn't he have that line about Wikipedia?
Oh yeah, the best. Carl keeps spouting nonsense, and Klosterman deadpans, asking if Carl's facts are, quote, perhaps from Wikipedia. It's perfect. It's his whole career in one line, bringing media literacy critique to the weirdest places.
He even showed up on documentary now.
Yeah.
Playing a fake music critic.
Right. For the Blue Jean Committee.
Yeah.
Again, willing to satirize the very thing he actually does for a living. That takes a certain confidence.
And he's kept current, moving into podcasts too. Co-hosting Music Exists, appearing on Storybound.
It just shows he adapts. His voice, his way of thinking, it works across platforms. He finds ways to keep dissecting culture, whatever the format is. Hashtag tag outro.
So when you pull it all together, Chuck Klosterman occupies this really unique space, doesn't he? He's got this deep grounding in the Midwest, Windmere, North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. That outsider perspective.
But he's also completely fluent in the most inside baseball aspects of national media, sports theory, low culture, high philosophy. It's a weird mix.
It really is. And his career is just this masterclass in synthesis, I think. It proves that sometimes the sharpest cultural critics are the ones who've kept one foot outside the thing they're analyzing. That distance is key.
Right. That's skepticism born from isolation. And just to add that last bit of context from the sources, he's married to journalist Melissa Maerz since 2009, has 2 kids. So maintains a private life somewhat separate from the media world he dissects.
Which probably helps maintain that perspective. So what's the big takeaway here for you, the listener? Klosterman isn't just some guy who wrote cleverly about rock bands or basketball.
No, he's much more. He's a synthesizer,
Yeah.
right? Using pop culture, sometimes the sillier the better, as a way to ask these really fundamental questions.
Yeah, questions about identity, what makes something last, how we decide who the bad guys are, how reliable our own perceptions even are. He makes us think about why we value the things we value.
Which brings us perfectly to that final thought for you to chew on, drawing straight from, but what if we're wrong?
Okay, so think about right now, our current moment. What deeply held belief, what cultural certainty that feels absolutely solid and permanent today?
Could be about anything: technology, celebrity, music, politics.
What current thing do you think people 50 or 100 years from now will look back on and find completely, demonstrably, maybe even hilariously wrong?
Yeah. What widely accepted truth of 2024 is going to be the equivalent of, I don't know, thinking leisure suits were peak fashion? What's the Fargo Rock City of right now?
The thing we take so seriously that will eventually seem like this weird, temporary cultural blip.
That blindness to our own moment's absurdities, that's what Klosterman is always trying to get us to see.
And usually the thing you're most sure about, that's probably the place to start questioning.
Always is. All right, that's been the deep dive on Chuck Klosterman. Go forth and question everything.